Hi guys, welcome to AutoSpec 4x4. My name's Paul. I'm going to show you how to chuck a PSR lift kit in this brand new BT-50. Just before we get started on it, we always like to measure the car. So whenever we install the suspension, we can see just how much it's actually lifted up. From the top of the hub wheel guard there to the center of the hub on all four sides, take the measurement, write it down, and then you can compare it afterwards with your secondary suspension install. 540 mils. It's a pretty decent size, pretty standard. And we'll compare it afterwards after we've installed the new kit. First thing about doing the suspension, you're gonna need to get it up off the ground. We'll find a nice flat spot there, spread out, not too far back, not too far forward. Make sure it's a nice clean lift, clean contact, up we go. For the front section, when it doesn't reach, you've got telescopic legs. Always make sure that the biggest leg is fully extended before you pull out the smaller one. Same again, find a nice flat spot. Make sure the top's a little bit higher than the front because all the weight's in the engine. Now the car's up on the hoist, just before we take the wheels off, let's run through what we're chucking in today. In the front section, we've got the full brand new PSR TTG struts, fully adjustable, PSR ball joint spacers, extra little bit of lift, and the all important when installing a lift of this size, a diff drop. Very important, we'll get into that later on. Let's get the wheels off. A lot of these new cars come with different wheel stud covers, Toyotas, D-Maxes, Hiluxes, whatever you need. Take them off with a plastics trim tool. You can use a metal one, just might scratch your wheels a bit. Be careful. Come off pretty simply, pop it off. It's a very standard 1/2-inch air gun. You don't have one, an electric gun's just as good. Make sure it's got the guts to take them off. Here's all your standard suspension install. We're gonna change that, don't worry, it's gonna look a bit better. First things first, you wanna take the sway bar off of both sides, also all the brake lines too. Sway bars, sometimes they have a little 8mm stud in them, sometimes they've got a 6mm Allen key. Whichever one you've got, find the right tool for it, get your spanner on, Allen key in, crack it. Should be loose enough by hand. Take it off, out the way, that's gonna let this arm move freely. Brake lines are next. You don't wanna overstretch these when you disconnect this top arm. Take them off with a gun, don't put them back on with one though. Zip it off, that comes out the way, nice and loose. Change your socket from a 12 to a 10. Take off the one on the back side of the arm. Take off the one on the top side of the arm. That's gonna let your ABS line stay free. It's gonna stop it braking. You don't want that, it's gonna cause issues. To install the diff drop, we're gonna need to take this piece out, which means we're gonna need to remove these. Grab a gun, zip off the ashtrays. You've got your big 50mm spacers here and your replacement bolts. Dropping the entire thing, factory ones won't reach anymore, use the new supplied ones. Before you install the diff drop, it's very important to support the diff. Chuck a stand under it if you've got one. If not, you might be in a world of hurt unless you've got a mate with you. Wind it up, put a bit of pressure on it, nothing too crazy. You don't want to pick it up off the hoist, just support it so it doesn't drop. Then we can move on removing the bolts. We want to take these cross member bolts off too. One of the diff drop bolts is going to sit through that. Very simple. Crack them off, they can be a bit tight. I'd recommend using a large spanner. Same on the other side. Once they're finger loose, take them out. Before you'll be able to take out these inside bolts, you'll need to crack off your lower diff bolt. That there, when you've lifted up, will cause an excess pressure just to bite on these. Loosen them off, they'll slide out easy as. Yeah. One and two, and this piece falls away. Very easy. So your final two bolts that you're going to take out are just in front of the CVs here, left and right. Make sure that the diff is supported before you take these out. Before you take your final bolt out, just leave a couple of threads in it. It'll stop the diff from shifting and you won't have to realign it. One bolt at a time, easiest way to do it. Here's your standard factory bolt, here's your aftermarket bolt. You're going to retain this washer, this can go in the bin. The most important part of it all, bit of anti-seize, the next guy will thank you. One jack down carefully, just enough to get this in. It's going to go up there. A little easy trick as well, if it's just not coming enough, if you lift where the flange is, it'll give you a little bit extra room there. Chuck it up. get your new bolt, place it up in a spot, give it a little move about because it would have moved. Now just get these in finger tight just so it's not going to drop out because you still need to do the other side. You can see the 50mm spacer installed here is very important when you're installing a large lift kit as it's going to drop the angle of the CVs. These are what's going to turn your wheels. They're also going to turn the front wheels when you get it in four-wheel drive. You put these on too much of an angle, you risk pulling them out and then you're not going anywhere. With the diff bolts installed, now it's time to install the new cross member. Make sure your bolt lines up through with this packing plate. Reinstall the factory bolts in the same position they came out. Same way, back to basics. You don't want to send these up too much. Good solid nip and you're fine. After that, you've got one last bolt there for your lower diff. Tighten that up. Be careful if you're using a gun. Nothing too crazy, just enough. There's your diff drop installed. Here's your top control arm. Usually we'd remove this to install your suspension, but seeing as we're putting a ball joint spacer in, we'll just crack the bolts out and we'll loosen it off a bit so it's under less pressure. Oh, that was loud. Here's your upper control arm. We'd usually remove this, get the strut out. As we're putting the ball joint spacer in, we'll loosen this off so whenever we disconnect these, it doesn't bounce up and cause a bit of danger. You're not taking them out, you're just loosening to reduce the pressure. Couple of turns. That'll be fine. We're gonna take the bottom bolt out, just the nut off the yet. We're gonna leave that in for the now. Take the nut off, put it aside, you're gonna keep that. And then you're gonna crack the 3 top bolts holding the strut to the strut tower. There's 1, 2. The backing can be a little bit awkward to get to if you don't have the right spanner, but you'll survive. What I like to do, I always keep one bolt a few turns in. That way it's going to stop the strut dropping whenever you release the arms, and it's going to stop anything from potentially pulling out or breaking. Your ball joint spacer is held on by these 4 bolts. We're going to remove them and replace them with aftermarket ones. Crack all 4 of them. Don't take them all out though. 1, 2, 3, 4. With all these bolts at finger looseness, just be careful when you're taking them out. Make sure one's retained. Remove 3. On your last one, just gauge what's going to happen with it. I'm turning there, this isn't popping up, that's a good sign. Just do be aware that this can be under excess pressure. Just have a nice strong screwdriver or some sort of prying bar. Keep it levered down. And if you're good enough with one hand, you can remove the bolt. And you can slowly lift it up. There we are, it's nice and loose, not excess pressure, it's not going to bounce. Once you've got both sides to this stage, you'll be able to push the sway bar up and out of the way, which will give you clearance to take out the strut. So what you're going to do is take out the bottom bolt first, just give it a bit of a support, push the bottom one out, let it drop down gently. The top nut that we retained earlier, you're going to take the weight of the strut, take that nut off, set that aside, and your strut will drop out. So you might notice a couple of differences between the factory and the aftermarket. Here's your factory one, here's your aftermarket. Very obviously it's larger, giving you a better lift. You've also got a slightly thicker spring and a slightly tighter coil. It's going to give you a better compression ratio, it's going to give you better support. You've also got an adjustable base, so if you want to go even bigger, you can wind it up. You don't want to go as big, you can wind it down a little bit. With all suspension brands, there's always one strut that's a little bit bigger than the other. You want to put this into the driver's side, because you sit in the driver's side, so when you do sit, it's going to compress down and sit level. This one's slightly taller, I'm just marked with the driver's side for my own sake. We'll put this one aside, and we'll put this one in. Takes a little bit of practice to get these in carefully. It's a bit bigger, it's a bit more awkward. Just nice and steady. Make sure you've got a nut on hand to retain it. Up over the brake line, watch the guard, drop it down, under the arm, and it will rotate in a place with the top bolts going in and the bottom lining up. Once it's in, put your nut on, and that will keep it from falling out. Now let's move on to the ball joint spacer. We're just about to install the ball joint spacer. Before you do that, make sure the sway bar is down below the top control arm. Otherwise, you'll install everything, realize that's not there, and it'll be a bad day. Come on, a bit of brute strength. Down we go. There we are. So it doesn't need to be installed. You don't need to put it in the arm right now. We're just getting it out of the way so we can install the ball joint spacer. With the spacer, you've got a top plate and the actual spacer itself. There's a long side and a short side, as you can see. The long side goes to the back of the car. Now they're quite fiddly to line up, so you want to put 2 zigzag bolts in. Same thing, shorter side, longer side. Get 1 aligned, 2 aligned, and then, because you don't have a third arm, you want to get a little bit of tape, and you want to just stick it around, and that's going to keep it there. Now these are a bit fiddly, and even though I'm a professional, I might not look like it right now. Get your ball joint spacer there, use your body to support it. Get one side lined up, and then you can actually maneuver the actual ball joint itself. For a bit of a mechanical lift, you should be able to just get it through enough. Get a washer and nut on. One on the front side, one on the back side. And then before you tighten it up, while there's still a gap, take your tape off there so it's not stuck in place and it looks a bit ugly. Unless you're into orange racing stripes. With the mechanical lifter still in place, you want to do these up as decently as you can. Nothing too crazy, and again, do them up in a crisscross pattern. As soon as both of them are done up, you'll be able to drop the other 2 bolts in, and you'll be able to remove your lift. Just enough. And just enough. Now these are nylock bolts, and nylock nuts, sorry, and I've just put them through just to grab onto the nylon. That should be more than enough to be able to drop the bolts through, get a washer and nut on the other side. So after you install the ball joint spacer, once they're all tightened up, its main purpose is to just give you a bit more edge on that control arm, a bit more edge on your upright too. It's going to give you a nicer lift, and it's going to put a little bit less pressure through your CVs and change the geometry of your car slightly less. Bit more lift for a bit less intensity. Now that everything's installed, the only thing we need to do is the exact opposite from what we started. Get all the brake lines and sway bar back in place. Now it's important not to do these up with a gun because you can damage your ball joint. Takes a little bit of time and you need to be a bit careful. But you've come this far and you've done this much. Not a hard request, this one. Now, unlike the four-wheel driving community, we're not sending this, we're just giving it a bit. Run our brake lines again. You can see your retainers, pop it up, chuck your nut on, get everything in place before you do it all up. And then after it's all in place, and you can go and send it home. There's your 10s for the top here. Make sure that little hook's retained around. It's going to stop the bolt from turning, or the stud. And make sure the little locator is popped in place there as well. That'll stop that from turning over. And don't forget the little one at the very back there, just to get it lined up. It's a little bit tricky, but it'll be all right. And this one at the very back is a little bit tricky to line up. The right manipulation will be fine. And if you keep practicing, you'll be able to do it with your eyes closed. And there we have it. All that's left now, chuck the wheels on. Let's see how big it is. So when you're putting the wheels on, you can nip the nuts up, but don't send them all the way. Once on the ground, you want to find out your vehicle's specific torquing spec, and you want to torque them up to standard. Some people will argue a straight across pattern, other people will argue the 2 triangles. As long as you do them up evenly and not in a circle, you'll be fine. Just a little nip up, nothing too crazy. We'll torque them on the ground. Before the car comes all the way down, you want to measure your droop. So just like before, as we measured from the top of the guard there to the center of the hub, this is going to give you your standard flex amount. Good going. About 660. Now that the car's on the ground and it's completely off the hoist, we're going to do up the 2 top control arm bolts that we loosened at the start, and we're going to do up the bottom shock bolts as well. We always want to do these on the ground because it's going to give the arms the correct resting place. If you tighten them up in place when the car's on the hoist, when it comes down, it'll over torque your bushes and it'll damage them. It's never a good time. And I'm going to use my longer spanner to just secure them. Now there's a slot in here for the nut to sit in, so they will self-retain. So you can use both arms on a long spanner and go full Hercules on it. 1. And now careful you don't go punching the wheel guards. Go as much as you possibly can and then go a bit more. Perfect. Now for the bottom bolt. There's your bottom bolt, your bottom nut. Got your retainer on the back of it. Gun on. Send it up and we can torque it to spec afterwards. Final step is to torque the wheels up. You can get all your standard torquing specs online depending on your vehicle. I like to go around twice just in case you've tightened anything a bit too much and it loosens itself again. Six clicks and you're on your way. We're at 620 mils for the after install. So we've got a droop of about 55 mil, which is quite nice. And we've got an overall lift of close to 100 mil. Wicked as. Only thing this needs, new set of wheels. Well, there you have it. 4-inch PSR TTG, fully adjustable shock and ball joint spacer, along with the diff drop, fully installed. Remember to like and subscribe. You got any questions, hit us down in the comments. This car's ready to go off, on the road, off the road, wherever it needs to go. Hope this helped out, and if it doesn't, remember we have hoists here and we can install them for you.